Hello and welcome to Blythray Business News. Today I'm joined by Sean Wade, who is Chief Executive Officer of Power Metal Resources. Power Metal Resources listed in London on the AIM market with a symbol of POW and a market capitalisation of around £19 million sterling. Sean, welcome back on the programme. You've just signed, or just announced, you've signed a binding heads of terms with an organisation called GSA Environmental. Tell us a bit about that. Tell us about the deal and tell us something about GSA's operations.
Absolutely. Tim, thank you very much for having me back. It's lovely to see you. And it's a very exciting announcement for us. As you said, we've signed a binding heads of terms agreement. And that means that we're intending to acquire 75% of the issued share capital of GSA Environmental. We'll call them GSAE for short. And GSAE is a very exciting, innovative business involved in the extraction of critical metals from a wide variety of waste products, which includes what's called fly ash or heavy fuel oil ash generated by oil-fired power stations, in particular in Saudi Arabia, and we can go on to talk about that, but other types of waste products as well, which would include spent catalysts, chemical waste, and so on. So this business is potentially for us a very serious revenue generator. And something that I've been looking to put into the power business model since I took over as CEO, to bring in some a revenue base of the business, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But the deal essentially is that we're paying £75,000 in Power Metal stock for 75% of the business, and then there is an earn-out arrangement whereby over a 3-year period, if GSAE is making £1 million of profit, the maximum consideration that is payable to the current shareholders is £1 million. So as you can see from those metrics, we think this is a highly profitable business with fantastic growth potential, and we're very, very excited about doing this deal.
Okay, so you're taking waste materials and you're extracting the critical metals, which have always been central to your strategic aims. But in one way, is this a bit of a departure for strategically, because you've always invested previously in, I guess, early stage exploration projects. What will this particular acquisition do for you, or is it all just about the revenue generation?
That's a very good question. It's three things. Well, just to address the question first of all, yes, it is a departure from what we're doing. I mean, we are an incubator model. We've talked about the merchant banking type model, but fundamentally and essentially, we are a junior explorer over a number of different projects in different locations and for different commodities. Now, all junior miners have the same dynamic, which is that the business has to be funded, and typically it's funded through two things. One is fresh equity capital from the markets, which, as everybody knows, is often dilutive and certainly very expensive. It's a high cost of capital. And of course, the other is project disposal. Now, project disposal is equally unpredictable, difficult, and not a necessarily regular occurrence, and obviously also not necessarily for cash. So the capital profile of these businesses tends to be very much, kind of at the mercy of the capital markets, which we all know have been difficult for the last few years. As I mentioned earlier, it's been a key goal for me as CEO to bring in sustainable revenue generating model into the business, and that's what GSA does. So we are very actively engaged in conversations already in respect to bringing some transactions on board, and I'm hoping that we can announce that in due course. Now, particularly in respect to Saudi Arabia, we have this has come to us through our Saudi Arabian network. And
well, I was going to ask you, because I know their technology has applications in Saudi Arabia. I think I'm right in saying you've recently signed an MOU in Saudi Arabia. So what's the reasoning behind the increased interest in Saudi Arabia? You've already got this one benefit out of it, and can we expect more? What does it mean for your presence in the region generally?
Well, I think the short answer is it's very, very good for our presence in Saudi Arabia. So when we were at the FMF forum earlier in the year, we signed an MOU with the Ministry of Investment, or MISA, and that was to help us to establish ourselves essentially as an explorer, and to further our opportunities to get our hands on some projects, either as a joint venture partner with existing operators or in our own right as a license holder. Now, this is a major step forward for us in respect to our relationships, not just with the government, but really our profile and our status as a serious player and an operator in the region. We should also include Oman in that as well. So what we're looking to do, as we've been very clear in the past, has been two things in the region. One is to get hold of projects where we can bring our skills and our geological skills and modelling and so on to look for discoveries. And the other is to bring in investors into the power metal level from Saudi Arabia. And we've already done some of that. You may remember that we did a raise recently, bringing in a strategic Saudi investor. We're very confident that this transaction will also increase the opportunity for us to bring in Saudi investors. Now, just to go back to the point about capital structure, what I'm talking about is the very frequent need to bring in expensive, as I said, dilutive equity capital, really for working capital and to run the business. Now, that's the model, and that's the model that a lot of junior explorers have. And that model works great in good markets where you've got increasing share prices and obviously discoveries and so on. But it's tricky in markets which I would say are not normalised as they certainly have been. We're seeing improvements, but we've been in difficult markets. So I'm not saying that we're never going to raise money again. Okay, we have a lot of interest from strategic investors. As we mentioned, Saudi Arabia. If someone comes to us and says, as they did recently, we're prepared to pay a premium. We want to be involved in your company. We believe in your model. We think it has great application either here in Saudi Arabia or elsewhere. Of course, we would look at what is in the best interest of shareholders. So I don't want people to think, great, never going to raise money again. But I would like people to think, okay, this will reduce the dependence on this expensive capital that is really the principal option for funding these businesses. So that's one thing. The second point, which we covered, I think, is about how this helps us in Saudi Arabia. The third point, and I think is also very important, is what this can do for the rest of the business and our operations. So what GSAE also brings to us is a laboratory with ICP testing capability. Now, what that means in practice is soil sampling, rock chip sampling, the early stage exploration that we tend to specialise in can be tested in the GSAE lab, which will massively reduce the lead time, because at the moment, people will know that with the Tati soil project, with the soil samplings, for example, that took some months. It's obviously also quite expensive. We will have our own facility with order to significantly speed up the time it takes to be able to get some information to the market on what we've got, and obviously very significantly reduce the cost of that process. Now, it's important to understand that you can't mark your own homework, so these will be unaccredited results, but the final assay testing will obviously still be done independently, of course, but this will, in the first instance, enable us to report back to the market on what we're finding. So when we talk about Malopo, I think we'll touch on that towards the end, and Tati, these are the kinds of things where we can make a big difference to our cost base and the time it takes for us to produce results. So it gets us more involved in Saudi Arabia. It reduces our dependence on capital markets for fundraising, and it reduces our cost and improves the efficiency of the exploration projects and the rest of the business. So it's a win across the group.
Across the entire portfolio. I don't think I didn't appreciate that until you started talking about it just now. But let's just look to the future a little bit. What should viewers, what should investors, what should potential investors be thinking of when they look at power in the coming months? What are the headlines we should watch out for?
Well, I'm hoping that I'm going to be back talking to you regularly, because we've got a lot coming up. And look, I know that news flow is a bit lumpy. It's a bit like London buses, and we know that. One of the things that GSA will do will be to create a lot of news flow and a lot of regular information. So every time we sign an MOU and we have another transaction relating to whether it be fly ash or chemical waste, we'll obviously be talking about that. But in terms of the rest of the business, I think people know that there are two major IPOs underway at the moment. There's UEE, the uranium business coming out of Athabasca in Canada, which we've talked about together before. There's the First Development Resources, FDR, projects in Australia, which is also, both of those are well underway and actively marketing to investors as we speak. So we're hoping to get those over the line as quickly as we can. We've got the Malopo drill program going on at the moment, and that's getting very exciting. We've got to obviously manage our excitement there a little bit, because we don't yet know what we've got, but the drill program is going absolutely according to plan. We are getting very close to the target depth, where we will start hopefully to see the kind of mineralisation that we're hoping for and that we're targeting. We will be talking more about that, I hope, in the next week or 2 weeks. I can't promise that because it obviously depends on what we produce, but we will hopefully be talking about what we're seeing in the cores and the early signs, which will obviously not be fully tested or accredited, but will give some indications, hopefully, of the mineralisation, the discovery that we're all hoping for at Malopo. So that's coming up. So we've got drilling news coming up, we've got corporate news in terms of IPOs, and then we've got obviously the new news flow that's going to be coming out of GSA, which is going to be talking about an increased revenue profile. So, and that's obviously before we talk about other aspects of the portfolio, where we're looking to streamline the business, focus our resources on our best opportunities, and we'll be talking more about that as we go forward. But you know, this is a company that generates news. That's part of the advantage of having a big portfolio, and I'm looking forward to talking more about all of those aspects in the coming weeks.
Thanks, Sean. Exciting and busy times at Power Metal Resources. That was Sean Wade, Chief Executive of Power Metal Resources, giving us some background about the deal they've struck with GSA in Saudi Arabia for extracting critical minerals from waste materials, and also just giving us a bit of an insight to the coming news in the rest of the year from the portfolio there within Power Metal Resources. That's it for this edition of Blythe Ray Business News. Thanks for watching.